You're listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks, your source for centered and focused play therapy coaching.
Hi, I'm Dr. Brenna Hicks, the Kid Counselor. This is the Play Therapy Podcast, where you get a masterclass in child-centered play therapy and practical support and application for your work with children and their families. In today's episode, I am answering a question from someone in England. She asked me not to use her name, so I will refer to her as Kay. And she is curious about messy play, which, what an important topic. We talk about this a lot in our training groups, actually. And we had a very long discussion, both live in the Zoom call and in the communication chat app afterwards, about how we handle messy play. So this is definitely something that we need to be prepared for, know how to handle, know how to stay true to the model. So Kay, thank you for letting me know that this was a question that you all needed answered. So I'm going to read parts of her email so that you can kind of get a sense of what she is curious about, and then we'll dive in. So she said, how messy should we let kids be or get in the playroom? And one of her concerns is that she does not have any staff to help. So she has to clean up after the client in between sessions. So that does change things a little bit versus having an office manager or someone that might be able to help you clean the playroom. So that is an important consideration. And I was on my own my entire career until 2 years ago when I hired an office manager. So I know very well the pressure of knowing that you have a very tight turnaround and having to have it clean for the next child. So I definitely feel that pain. So she said, during sessions, when a child is at the craft table, I encourage them to use a messy tray when using glue and paints to contain them, as I have found that things quickly get out of control. However, there are some children that I get the feeling they need to show me their internal mess, and I'm worrying that I'm clipping their wings. So how do you approach the whole messy play aspect, paints, glue, water, while keeping boundaries, but still allowing the child autonomy to express themselves as they need to? And then she kind of elaborated a little bit further and said, how do I reflect back in a constructive, useful way, aside from noticing that she needs to consume all of the products, meaning the paint, the glue, like everything crafty, it's just like more and more and more. And then the second is, how do I stay grounded while helping her stay grounded as I'm trying to contain the mess? I use a tray, she mentioned it. If I didn't do this, the mess would be everywhere, and I'm concerned that the girl would find her own mess too overwhelming. But I also find that I get dysregulated by the mess and by trying to contain the mess. So, Kay, thank you so much. This is a really helpful topic. So let's look at 3 things that I think are requirements when we're dealing with messy play, and then we'll kind of unpack those together. So before we dive in, though, here's a really helpful rule of thumb just to keep in mind as big picture overview. If you choose to have it in the playroom, you choose to deal with the consequences of that item. So, not that I'm trying to give you choices, but it is the truth. So, it is ultimately up to you what you choose to include and allow in your playroom. And certain personalities of therapists know their frustrations, their tolerances, their limitations, and they choose accordingly. So, I've known therapists that specifically and intentionally do not really have that many aggressive toys because they really don't do well with aggressive play. Likewise, if you know that you really don't deal well with messy play, you can choose to limit what arts and crafts materials you have in there and limit the amount of mess that can be made. So the rule of thumb is, if you choose to have it in there, if it is in your room, you also then have to accept the consequence that a child can make an absolute mess with it. So it is fair game for a child to do whatever they want with whatever you have in there. And if you know your bent is toward organization and cleanliness and structure, and you don't have time to clean up, and you don't want paint everywhere, then that's an important acknowledgement, and you choose accordingly what goes in your room. So now that that disclaimer has been thrown out there, I have 3 things that I think we should talk through. So number 1, you need to set yourself up for success. Number 2, you need to know your own personal needs and where that all falls. And then finally, art and craft mess is different than mess making play. So we're going to tease that apart too, because I think that's an important distinction. So let's look at setting yourself up for success. What I mean by that is, if you know that you don't want a child to ever dump sand on your head in the middle of a play session, you shouldn't have a sand tray in your room. If you know that you can't handle a child pouring a massive bucket of water all over your floor, you shouldn't have water in your playroom. If you can't handle paint getting spilled on the carpet or flicked on the wall or rubbed all over the baby doll, you should not have paint in your room. So there is something to be said for setting yourself up for success. And what I mean by that is you need to think through what you can handle, what you can tolerate, and therefore choose accordingly with what is provided to the kids in your playroom. And you're not only setting yourself up for success, but you're setting the child up for success. Because if the entire time that the child is playing with water and they're carrying it and they're spilling it and they're knocking the bucket over and it's soaking your carpet and all of that is going on in your head, you are no longer present, you are no longer engaged, you are no longer unconditionally accepting of the child, you're no longer able to preserve the relationship. So it's detrimental to the child and to you and to the entire process if you have things in the room that cause you anxiety, frustration, intolerance, whatever. So set everyone up for success and only allow things in your playroom that you can handle. And now, then there are therapists that say, right, but if I don't have arts and crafts stuff in there, it doesn't allow them to play out the things that they need to. Let me assure you, if a child needs to make something, if they need to create something, if they need to make a mess out of something, they will find something else in your room with which to do it. So now, do we need to have representation from all of the categories of toys? Do we need to have some arts and crafts material in your room? Yes, absolutely. But you could have toilet paper rolls. You could have egg cartons. You could have paper towel rolls. You could have construction paper. That is still arts and crafts. That is still allowing that same type of play to unfold, but it is not going to make the mess that some of these other things that you're describing, Kay, in your email, such as glue and paint and glitter and all of those things. So you need to be aware of what will set you and the child up for success, number one. Number two, you need to know your own personal needs. So like I mentioned, I've known therapists that do not do well with aggressive play. So they don't have swords in their room. They don't have knives in their room. They don't have Nerf guns in their room. Why? Because it unnerves them. Now, I personally like aggressive play, except when, I get, not too long ago, I don't know if I shared this, but I got hit in the lip with a nunchuck, and it wasn't a foam nunchuck. It was a hard plastic nunchuck right on my upper lip. My tooth actually cut the inside of my lip. I had like a big red bump and like it was cut on the inside. And I mean, when that happens, I'm not happy about it, let me assure you. But I have no issue with aggressive play. I actually find aggressive play very healing and therapeutic, and I just like watching the whole thing. But there are certain therapists that are like, hard no, I do not like aggressive play, so they limit what they have in there. This is about knowing yourself, knowing what your boundaries are, knowing what your comfort level is, knowing what you can accept. Now, we were just talking about discomfort. I mentioned this in the last episode, actually. We were just talking about discomfort in the training. And I was talking about there are certain types of discomfort that we can work on, right? If we have a need to clean up while the child's playing because it's our own need for organization, that is something we can work on. If we have to sit on our hands for the entire play session, that is something we can stop ourselves from doing. And we realize, it doesn't really make me that uncomfortable if I don't clean up, especially when we know that it's therapeutically valuable not to. Right? That is something we could work on and lower our level of discomfort from a child playing with 85 things in an hour and not putting any of it away. However, there are certain other things that we absolutely would not be okay with. A child intentionally trying to hurt us, a child intentionally trying to break a toy, a child trying to escape and run out of the playroom and out of the building. I mean, there are things that there's no amount of working on it that it's going to change the discomfort. It will always be there. So when you know your own personal needs, sometimes you can say, all right, you know what? I have to let this, I don't want water in the room go. It's just water. It's only going to be wet on the carpet for a little while. It will dry. No big deal. You might be able to get yourself there. But there will be other things, potentially about messy play, that you just can't get over. And so it's really important to kind of introspectively look at where you are, what you need, what your preferences are, and make decisions accordingly. And then finally, craft play that you're describing, Kay. So the water, the paint, the glitter, the glue, that type of play, that is different than mess making. So when we talk about mess making play, that is when a child feels compelled to make a mess. So they swipe your shelves, they swipe your cubbies, they take every game piece out of the game board and chuck it all over the room. They empty every bucket, they dump every bin. That is mess making play. Very, very different from dysregulated, chaotic, consuming, creative, messy play. So it's very important to see the difference, because it's easy to say, oh my gosh, this kid just makes a mess every time they come in. Well, mess making play is different than messy play, because messy play, specifically related to arts and crafts, that is typically just a reflection of their dysregulation, their internal state of chaos, and they kind of finally have the freedom to let it all out, and they don't have that freedom anywhere else. So sometimes they just need to make a mess, but it is not mess making. So I wanted to make that really clear, because we need to be able to distinguish between the two. And then my final thought is there are options to allow for art and craft messy play that aren't going to make you crazy. So what I mean by that is, on our chat group, we were talking with the trainees in my training program. They were talking about paint, and this very question came up. Okay, how do you handle it? What do you do when a child wants to pour the entire bottle of paint? Do you set a limit there? Do you not? Then you have to buy more. Then no one else can use it. What if it gets on the carpet? I'm in a rented space. I can't ruin the room with paint. What do I do? Here's what the moral of the story is. Solve the problem creatively. So offer paint pens instead of paint. Offer watercolor paints instead of liquid paints. If you get a set of watercolor paints, there's usually like 8 little circles on one long plastic thing, and you have to wet the brush, dip it in the little hard circle, and then you paint with it, and then you dip it in the hard circle again. There is no way, none, that you can make a mess with watercolor paint. It doesn't spill. It doesn't get all over the place. It doesn't get wasted. You can only make the circle so wet and only get so much paint with a wet paintbrush. That is what I've chosen to do. I hate liquid paint. I hate it. I hate everything about it. I know myself though. So I was like, you know what? I don't want to deprive kids of having the opportunity to paint. So I will have paint pens and I will have watercolor paint. And then they still have an outlet, but it doesn't make me crazy. I hate glitter. I hate sequins. I hate those little, what the heck are they called? Orbeez. I hate Orbeez. I hate all things like that. And I don't have any of them in my room. Lots of my therapists do. And every time I walk in there and it looks like an art supply store exploded and vomited at the same time and they're trying to clean it up, I'm like, yeah, Joker, that's why I don't have that stuff in my room. But some therapists love it. Some therapists absolutely love kids being able to take pipe cleaners and sequins and glitter and pom-poms and puffs and whatever, and they make this creative, imaginative, amazing thing, and like it's just happy for everybody. I don't do well with it. So I have foam stickers in my room that don't require glue. I have pipe cleaners in my room that they can do whatever they want with, but you can't make a mess with them. I have construction paper. I have crayons and colored pencils and markers and pens and everything you could possibly want to make something creatively arts and craft related. But none of it you can make a mess with. So I think the moral of the story is you don't want to limit what a child needs to do in the room. You limit what options they have. So you ultimately have the control over what they are allowed to use and what happens. Now, look, if you choose to have liquid paint in your room, you can absolutely set a limit that you really would like to paint, but the paint is not for anywhere else but for this tray. So if you choose to paint, you choose to keep all your paint on this tray. That's a perfectly appropriate limit. You're not telling them they can't paint. You're just making sure the paint stays in one area. So if you have liquid paint, use limits appropriately. But I choose not to because I would much rather let a kid go hog wild with watercolors, and I have no concern whatsoever for a mess because there won't be one. So, Kay, thank you so much for your email. I hope that's helpful for all of us. I hope that we all kind of get a better sense of how to allow messy play and how to manage it well for everyone involved. So if you would like me to answer a question in a future episode, email me at brenna@thekidcounselor.com. You can also email me just to say hello and to introduce yourself and let me know that you're listening and where you happen to be in the world. So, Kay from England, thank you so much. I'm really grateful for each and every one of you. I look forward to talking with you again soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks. For more episodes and resources, please go to www.playtherapypodcast.com.